Well, thank you everyone for coming out this afternoon. Good morning, yes. We are still morning. My name is Joshua Schwartz. I'm Executive Director of the Mad River Valley Planning District. This is the preliminary concept presentations from what's known as the VDAT project, the Vermont Downtown Assistance Team. And this has been a really fun and exciting week of a team of consultants brought together through a project made possible through funding from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, through the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Program, and led through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development at the state in the Vermont Downtown Program. In the Mad River Valley, the villages of Waitsfield and Warren were two of 7 villages or downtowns that were selected for this suite of services and assistance in identifying and in providing support for our villages. It's been great having the energy of the consultants and having community members engaged in conversation, and I'm excited to see what sort of preliminary results come out today. There will be some additional visits and work happening through the end of this year, so this isn't final. But I also want to mention that this is being recorded and will be available in the middle of next week. There'll be a YouTube video that'll show the presentation and have the dialogue of the conversation. So again, thank you all for being here. Trip of Arnett Muldrow is the lead consultant on the project. I'd like to have you come up and take things away.
Great, thank you, Joshua. Well, it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you so much for those of you who came the other night to provide, or the other afternoon. My days are running together now. It was the other evening, that's the proper way to say it, to provide really great input to our team. I think we had 25 people in the room, and we really do appreciate the comments that you made. Bear in mind, our team has been working diligently over the past 4 days. It's a lot to look at, so we're definitely calling this preliminary because there's ongoing follow-up and additional work that there is to do. The role that I play in the project is the market analysis part, and it's the part that drives the rest of my team crazy when I talk about it because it's a lot of numbers, and I'll be speaking more on a regional basis about that. And then I'll be turning it over to the design team that includes Randy Wilson from Community Design Solutions, Laz Skangas from Arlen Skangas, who was here with Heather Fontaine. They're based in St. Albans, Tom McGilloway and Nate Scott from Mahan Reichel Associates out of Baltimore, Maryland. And we were the firm selected, and we're very grateful to be working here in Vermont for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And appreciate Leanne and Richard, all your hard work, and Joshua, all your hard work in coordinating this week. We look forward to following up with you in the future. So I'm going to start out with market assessment. Again, I'm going to put it in the context of Warren and Waitsfield together. It's very difficult to separate them from a market standpoint, but what it is important to do is then, once you understand the overall market, really understand what's appropriate for Warren, because a lot of what's in the market would never be appropriate in a village the scale and size of Warren. And so when I talk through these things, please bear in mind I'm talking on an overall basis, and then I'll zoom in on what we feel like are the key opportunities that really are for Warren and that really respect the community character that's here. We had businesses participate in a zip code survey. It was done leading up to Columbus Day week, so we're catching a real peak time. I want to acknowledge that, present some very unique situations that we want to acknowledge as we're going through it, but I think you'll see some surprises as well. We had 18 participants. There were 4 in Warren and 14 in Waitsfield, and the reason I put an asterisk next to the 4 is that there was a division of tracking at the Warren store between upstairs and downstairs, and there was also a division at Picture Inn between the pub and the restaurant. So I'm counting it as 4. It's sort of 4 embedded within 2 overall businesses. Over 1,400 customer visits were recorded during that time by the 18 participants, and they represented 685 unique American zip codes that passed through the community. And I will tell you, many of those zip codes are attributable to traffic going to the Warren store. 45 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and 10 foreign countries were represented passing through. And as you might expect, Canada and UK were by far the most. And then we had some Israelis, and we had some South Africans, and we had a few others come through from other places. Due to the fact we did a peak week survey, we'll be coordinating with Joshua on doing a non-peak survey. We really think it's important to do a comparative before ski season kicks off to understand how the market functions. And Joshua's done a lot of research on the seasonality, on income levels, and sort of how tax revenues ebb and flow through the seasons. And that's a really neat thing for us to know and understand a little bit better. So at the end of the day, when we look at non-local visitor traffic, one of the things that surprised me, and this one was something that I don't know that I was quite expecting, but over 1 in every 4 customers in all those businesses came from Vermont, and they were from outside of the Mad River Valley. They were from outside of the Warren Waitsfield zip code and all the adjacent zip codes. So that was the number one market, is the rest of Vermont coming to the Mad River Valley. I'd expected, quite frankly, during that week to see the visitors almost eclipse the state, the visitors from out of state to eclipse the state. Your number one state shouldn't come as a surprise. Massachusetts at 18%, so a little under 1 in 4 customers. New York is about 10% of the customers. Connecticut, 5% of the customers. And then over here, I separate it by region of the country. So you see things like, I want to make sure I get this right, the West, 11%, the South, 8%, the Midwest, 6%, the rest of the Northeast, Maine, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, 5%. The Mid-Atlantic, which would be Maryland, DC, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, 5%, and then international traffic, another 5%. So really interesting dynamic of sort of going through this. And we've done these studies in lots of communities across the country, and it's sometimes helpful to sort of see how you stack up, and I don't expect you to be able to read all these communities. That's the 685 unique zip codes that you have. It puts you in the top tier of many of the communities we've ever worked in. Of course, again, we're catching it at peak visitation time, so if we're catching it during an off time, we probably won't have quite as many. Regardless, visitors are playing a critical role to the success of the overall area because they're bringing in money, and the data will start to bear that out a little bit as well. Just for interest's sake, I have you ranked here fifth place in everywhere we've ever worked. The most we've ever seen in a week is 1,500 customers, and that was in Waynesville, North Carolina. The second most we've ever seen was Church Street Marketplace in Burlington, and they did it 2 times of the year, just like we're going to be doing it 2 times a year. A more peak time, they had about 1,200 unique zip codes. And then the second time Burlington did it is this other green bar right next to you, and it dropped in a little bit more of an off-season time. So just interesting to sort of see how you stack up. When we get down in communities like this, we're getting into communities that are itty-bitty places that are very locally oriented. They don't tend to have any visitor traffic at all. 46 states, and then, of course, if I were to add the foreign countries in and Puerto Rico, it would put your bar up even higher. Burlington's the only place I've ever worked where all 50 states came through in a week. To get a North Dakotan pride loose is a very... North Dakota feels it when one of them leaves, so So that's a very hard state to get. It's like my most difficult state to get, and they managed to squeeze a North Dakota into Burlington somehow. But you all got a Montanan, you got a Hawaiian, you didn't get an Alaskan, and you didn't get those doggone Dakotas. They're just elusive. Just interesting. That's interesting data to see. More important for us, we look at the two zip codes here, Warren and Waitsfield. We're looking at about 4,300 people that live here year-round. That's the estimated population. Unlike much of Vermont, this area is growing. And so when we work in a Springfield, it is completely flatlined or declined. When we work in Brattleboro, it is completely flatline population growth. When we work in Wilmington, it's flat. Berry is flat. Waterbury is growing, and you are growing. So we see you're bucking a trend that we're seeing in Vermont. That growth is projected to continue, though not as much a robust rate. And again, that's in the two zip codes. So bear in mind that Waitsfield's going to absorb much of that growth, or places outside the village will absorb a lot of that growth. We're not talking about all that growth accruing inside the village. Yes, sir.
I assume in that 4,258 number include Facein.
Yes, Facein falls within the zip codes. Yes.
It's a little bit misleading. It's not just one.
Right. It's the Warren. I have to qualify. It's the Warren and Waitsfield geographic zip codes. So bear in mind that someone may have Facein and they're picking up their mail at the post office box, but it's counting the warm bodies that are in those zip codes. So yes, important point. But if you get that unusual situation where your house resides in a zip code it's different than you say your address is. The median age here is 46. Vermont's the second oldest state in the United States of America. Maine is the oldest. Vermont's 42. You're older than Vermont as median age. The United States is 37. That is an important factor, and one that I would like to delve deeper into as we talk about a few things. Your median household income is $67,783. Now, that was one that when I see a median age of 46 and also a median household of 67,000, that presents a very unique dynamic, because oftentimes when I see a higher median age, I see a slightly depressed income because the retirees who are here are not doing that. They may have wealth, accumulated wealth, but they're not getting that income stream that gets reported. But that was an encouraging number to see. And certainly you're eclipsing Vermont by almost $14,000 in your median household income. And Vermont's its median income slightly better than the United States. So really good numbers to look at. But it's interesting, you go back to this 46 median age, but 30% in these two zip codes are married couples with children. And so that represents a really unique opportunity for them. And how do we shake out, that opportunity? And I'll show you a slide of that. And then another piece that relates, I think there's a correlation here. 23% of those employed are self-employed. And of those, about 10 or 11% of the overall employment, about 1 in every 10 works from their home. So again, it definitely shows that if you're living here, you're making some very deliberate choices. To be self-employed implies that. To work from home implies that you're making some deliberate decisions to be here. And of course, we're seeing a trend nationally where more and more people are working from home. We're seeing a lot more of what we call lone wolves, that can live anywhere and they're choosing quality of life as a way to get this in. We also like to look at psychographics, and I know my team's tired of the joke, but that's not how many psychos are in the community. Psychographics really takes all your demographics and puts it into just an amalgam of information. So we're looking at age, we're looking at income, we're looking at buying habits, we're looking at what kind of cars they buy, what kind of TV shows they watch, what kind of magazines they subscribe to, And we use Nielsen to do this. Nielsen provides a really unique way of looking at it. So those who are in the green category are those who tend to be, and I say tend to be, it's not solely, in and of itself, but these are people who are either do not have children in the home, they may be married, they tend to be younger, they tend to be starting their careers, and you see 31% are what's called midlife success. And it's a very interesting category because it reflects back to this independent, they're making a way, they're doing innovative things. And so 1 in every 3 represents a fairly affluent demographic that sort of falls into play. The young achievers are similar to these folks, but they're not quite there yet. They're still working, they're still striving in a lot of ways. And then you see what we call striving singles. These are the ones that they may be struggling in some respects. Now, when I work in a community that has a university in it, striving singles comprise a massive amount of the psychographic piece because every university student is a striving single. Now, granted, they may have an incredible income from mom and dad, but their natural income is not being reflected that way. And we all know they're not as striving. They're not struggling to make ends meet in often cases. When we look at the blue categories tend to be more of those in family categories. So you see accumulated wealth, which is a tiny sliver. Young accumulator, well, that's 4%, excuse me. The young accumulators here and mainstream families. Mainstream families are sort of they're not affluent. They're sort of riding that middle line. They're doing a good job, but they're not wealthy. And then you see affluent empty nests represent the next biggest piece. And these are wealthy folks who tend to be older. The children have left the home. And so they are, but they're still at a point in their life stage where they're acquiring goods. Maybe it's a second home that they've turned into a permanent home. Maybe it's someone who has retired from their lifelong job and decided to pursue their second career here. That's a lot of what we see in that affluence. Conservative classic, again, I hate these names, but that's what I'm stuck with. Nielsen tells me what they are. I joke around that these folks drive fancier cars than these do. The conservative classics do fine. They're comfortable. They don't have a lot of free extra money to spend. And then you see the cautious couples and sustaining seniors, which is about 7%. And these are the folks that really do need our care in a lot of ways because they're past the point in their life where they're doing a lot of accumulation of goods. In fact, many of them are sustaining themselves on either a retirement fund or Social Security or a combination of those, particularly the sustaining ones. The cautious couples are those that, they're not going to go out on fancy vacations or eat a $200 dinner. So it's just interesting to sort of see those things break out for the overall community. As I continue to do research, I'm going to split the 2 zip codes and see if there's a break between the 2. And we'll talk about that on a future visit and delve deeper into seeing what the Warren zip code looks like as compared to the Waitsfield zip code. When we look at the market as a whole, please don't let these charts make your eyes go completely crossed. We like to look at what we call retail leakage. And retail leakage is where consumers in the 2 zip codes are spending an amount of money. Stores in the 2 zip codes are selling an amount of goods. If consumers are spending more than stores are selling, you are leaking sales. That means you can't get it here. And so you're having to drive to Williston to get it, to Barrie to get it, or you're trading your dollar. You say, I need, Boxer Shores. I can't find it here. I'm going to buy it off the Land's End catalog. And so they're trading dollars for other things. Communities that leak tend to be those that that there's just not enough retail there to support the people who live there. We often find communities like that being very high growth suburban communities where the retail hasn't caught up or they're adjacent to a metro area. You are not a leaking community, you are a gain community, and that's critically important. You actually import $41 million, the two zip codes import $41 million every year. So stores sell $41 million more than consumers spend. And that's a conservative number because that's assuming that all the consumers here are spending all of their dollars here in the two zip codes, which we know is simply not the case. You may be spending a great deal of your money here and you may be working really hard to shop local within the community, but there are probably times within the year or that you're doing a catalog shopping, you're doing online shopping, or you're traveling to a bigger market, maybe that trip to New York or Boston to do that once a year or whatever. So what it points to, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, it goes back to that original chart where we're showing the visitation here, that this community is an importer. You're dependent upon the visitor to sustain the retail and restaurant base that you have. And so the visitor is here to augment the kinds of things that you enjoy, the kinds of things that you partake in. The visitor is here to help make that economy tick along. It's certainly not happening in all categories. For instance, you're going elsewhere by and large to buy your automobiles. There are no car dealerships here, and nor do you want any car dealerships in the valley, I don't think. I know there's a used car dealership or two, but I'm not talking about the big Ford with the sign and all that. Things like furniture and home furnishings, your demand exceeds supply in furniture, but in home furnishings, you're importing dollars. That makes perfect sense for a market like this because a visitor is not going to buy a sofa. The visitor is going to buy the pillows that go on the sofa. Now the resident is going to buy all that furniture, and so they may have to go elsewhere to get all those things. And I can break it down in ad nauseum detail. I just want to hit on some of the highlights here. You import sales in groceries, and this is a really unusual situation. The 3 stores in Waitsfield, they would not exist if it weren't for the visitor. There wouldn't be enough to sustain all 3. And so that points to it. Now, I will tell you the Warren store is an enigma to me. I have no idea what reporting category you're showing up in according to the United States industrial classification codes. It could be other or all of the above or whatever else. But we do see an interesting thing where your supply, your demand and supply on gas is somewhere. There's room for some of that. Your clothing stores, you're certainly leaking sales in a lot of your clothing, which makes a lot of sense. When we get down to things like jewelry, you're leaking sales there. Of course, sporting goods, you're doing a great job of importing sales. Again, and within the 2 zip codes, there are an awful lot of shops that are supplying skiers, recreation, so forth, and so you'd be doing better at that. One big one, again, no surprise, general merchandise. This is like the dirty category that includes Walmart. But I'm here to tell you, there's not enough demand to support one. Don't expect one to poke around. Don't think that there's going to be one on the horizon. They're a $70 million creature. I know this week was the week the one opened in St. Albans after 25 years of, wrangling. But here, there's just not enough support for one, so you have no worries about these big kahunas sort of sneaking into the neighborhood. And then getting down into food service, you're certainly doing better. You're importing dollars in restaurants, but in fast food, quick service, I say fast food, service restaurants that you're not sitting down to be served. And so it can be fast food, but it could also be a taco stand that you walk up to. There's room for growth in that, but not very much. So at the end of the day, when I start looking at some of your conclusions here, you have this incredible, and this is taking, okay, let's say, all right, we just looked at the region. Let's look at Warren and all that data, and how does that relate to Warren Village? you have these incredible anchor uses that are serving as a base here, as a grounding. So with the Picture Inn, the art gallery, the Warren store, you've got this really neat grounding effect that keeps locals here and shopping here. The uses, though, are visitor dependent. And I think if you were to ask the folks who run these businesses, if the visitor disappeared from their customer base, they would struggle as a business. So they do need those visitors in order to make them as vibrant as they are. But what's neat about the size of a village like Warren is it gives you this really unique chance, I don't know how to say this the right way, to cherry pick the right match for who you are and say, you know, what would round out the village? What would offer us the kind of use that would be appealing to a visitor, but that we as a local might enjoy? And I know in the past you've had like a day spa that was here. I know that closed. But that's a use that I still see demand for. It may be that that spa closed for another reason. I don't know all the background there. I'm looking at things like, you know, personal service, additional, perhaps casual dining, or a pub that may be not as, you know, certainly the Picture Inn has a pub, and it might be at a different price point or at a different sort of character of a Picture Inn. Galleries would be one. And then the other piece here is this whole idea of home-based businesses and a place for an entrepreneurial landing pad. So that if I'm a home-based business here, or I'm an entrepreneur that wants to locate here, you're giving me an enticement or an inducement with maybe an upper floor space that's unique, that I can occupy that space and make my base of operations here. Now, having said that, one of the things that came out in our input session was the cell service issue. And so unless that business is at the top of the cemetery, you're not necessarily always going to get a clear signal. I'm doing some additional research on an FCC ruling that just got issued this year that is looking at local boosters for cell towers, and that may be something that I've just got to delve deeper into that research and see to what degree localities can do that, and do that in conjunction with the cell phone companies to be able to boost locally rather than depending on Verizon to say this is the right thing for you all. But it's a brand new ruling, and as I opened it up to research it, I was like, whoa, I'm not going to have time to read through, you know, this federal ruling and get all the details. So I see that as an opportunity, you know, and certainly the becoming a broadband would also, you know, enhance this entrepreneurial piece for Warren as too. Again, I think you're in a luxurious position to really cultivate the character of the community, have selective growth with things that you feel like are appropriate for you, and the rest of the market can absorb some of those things that are really more appropriate for an area that can handle it, that's got more traffic capacity and parking capacity. So you've got to be gentle in how you look at choosing things, but it gives you some opportunities to explore them, and you certainly have some of the zoning tools now in place to look at those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Randy to talk about some of the physical recommendations, and if you have questions on the market stuff, I'll be happy to come back to those when they wrap up. So,
all right, thanks, Trip. Good morning. We had a great couple days here, and when we talked in terms of physical enhancements, I want to emphasize that some of the things we're going to be talking about are really kind of with a gentle hand. We're not saying, coming in from on high, saying to change the whole character of the community, because it's really a wonderful community. It has a wonderful character and scale. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then talk about some projects some efforts and plans that you already have underway with Town Green. We've heard a lot about traffic calming, and then talked about an infill opportunity in the village core. First of all, related to village characters, as someone who's been to Warren for the first time, one of the things that really jumped out, the very informal qualities of it, very friendly, and we describe it as a very friendly character. Everything's not neat and crisp with hard finished curbs and gutters and hard surface. It has a very comfortable feel, and meaning that in a very positive way. The use of stone throughout the community, whether from nature or used in construction, is really prevalent. And then some of the flower planting from the garden club is quite attractive for the community. The wonderful stone that's evident in the hillsides and in the river. The use of stone in the stone walls and steps and construction throughout the community. And we're just highlighting these because as enhancements are made, it's really important to continue to incorporate and use stones, use these materials that really define the character of the community. And then use of flower. These planted triangles that I understand the garden club has installed and maintained, they just really set a very positive tone. And just little details of individual properties, like the picture in, the fence, the garden along the road, those little details really add to the character. And we would encourage that a lot more. And your neighbor to the south, Wilmington, Vermont, is probably, I think in all the communities that we've worked in, have really kind of taken this to an extreme level, and meaning that in a positive way. Not only does the village and the town provide flowers and maintenance of those, but a lot of the individual property owners have caught on, and those little details really add to that sense of place in the community. And even a little island next to a parking lot for them becomes an opportunity for a color. So those are some very simple ways that you can continue to enhance the environment. And even in the bridge crossing, now this is Wilmington as well. Someone at the meeting the other night mentioned that no matter what direction you come to Warren, you have to cross a bridge, and but they're saying that some of the bridge crossings are really not celebrated, or you might pass over them without really noticing them. And there's an opportunity, especially in your bridge right in the village core, to take advantage of this. And Randy put together before, this is existing condition, and then because of the shadow, like I said, this up showing, we heard a lot about restoring some lampposts on the piers and maybe incorporating some flowers along the edge, enhancing the sidewalk crossing along there, and celebrating, expanding, maybe duplicating some effort on each wing with what was done over on this side with some of the stonework and bench, just to celebrate that crossing a little more than it currently is. The town green, we heard a lot about a charrette that you have with the town green. And so we want to talk a little bit about some, we're really just showing what was arrived at in the sketch, but we had a couple considerations that we wanted to share. So this is the church, the town hall, the library, and then this is the where the Blair House is currently located. So from the charrette that I understand you had 50 participants involved in, the idea was that when the Blair House, that would be removed to create a green space, community green space, as well as the parking in this area. Most of it would be removed, and a larger parking resource would be located to the rear here, which is a fairly flat area right at the base of this slope. We think it's a pretty good idea, especially if you're removing this out here. There's an opportunity to get a larger parking resource in this area. And then this would remain open for some handicap parking spaces and being able to do a drop off to the church. So what we've distinguished in this color here is that even though you can drive through here on occasion, really distinguish that as more shared space. It should read more as pedestrian space that happens to allow cars on it versus designed as a roadway. And so you could still drive up across through to Cemetery Road and the public parking here, but designed in a way that a driver proceeds through Podge and they know they're in a space that's shared with pedestrians. So this concept was pretty much what was represented. This is the barn that's been repositioned in this area. We think it's important to save some significant trees. There's a large tree right out here. We think it'd be good to work around the row of some sugar maples along this edge and save those trees wherever possible. One of the things that we added was we think it's going to be important to have ADA handicap accessibility up to this. This is a pretty steep slope here and a steep slope here, and we're showing, I think we zoom in on this, let's see the next slide, zoom in on that, and this is showing a staircase that goes up the hill, but then there might be a ramp that allows at a 5% grade for handicap accessibility, especially if this is a major public parking resource up here and you want to attract people to the village. That's a very pleasant walk, but there's some sidewalk links moving here. You may be able to narrow these lanes a bit. There's some extra pavement in this zone that you could get a sidewalk along there across the fire station lots and then linking this way, and then there could also be a crosswalk leading up to the church steps. So that ADA access would be important, where you may be able to work around this tree, you may not be able to, but we think it's pretty important to have that accessibility. We're also showing, if we go back, zoom out, across from the library, that there might be a connection. This is a third of an acre lot that the village owns, and that would allow access to the water. In the charrette plan, there's some discussion that there could be parking up front at the level area and then park space behind. We're thinking if you could really maximize the parking you get back here, and our concern with putting parking right up front on the site is that you have this valuable open space amenity that links to the water, but it would be pretty much obscured by parked cars and it doesn't connect back to the street. We think maybe perhaps consider creating a landing, a crosswalk across to the library building. Then it might be just a simple path that goes back there, and there could be a platform overlooking the edge of the hill to the water that you see there. The other thing we're showing in the parking here is right now there's a lot of tree cover in here. They're not really significant trees. It looks like it's second growth. But there may be an opportunity to just position, when you design this parking, position some islands that you might be able to save some trees here and there, just to kind of take the sting that it's just not one big, large, open parking lot, but that it feels like it's more tucked into some of the tree cover that you see there. And then we're just showing some opportunities where you can continue, this hillside, continue some of the flower planting that you might have in these triangles. There's even a zone, steep slope of asphalt between these two drives and the firehouse that might become a planting area as well. And then this is a detail of that third acre site with access to the water. So it could be a very informal pathway, not even a paved pathway, and then a potential platform with access and views to the river. We heard a lot about traffic calming. We know you have some sidewalk plans underway with the Safe Routes to School grant. Some things that we think would be very important. We heard this a lot in the discussion the other night. Just visually narrow the roadway. We think you could do that in the village core, since the parking spaces bleed into the road surface itself. You might be able to visually narrow that roadway by just distinguishing between those different paved surfaces in a fairly subtle way. We think it's important to maintain parallel parking as much as possible. Implement those missing sidewalk enhancements, install crosswalks. We've heard a lot about the speed monitors. Got several emails from folks or comments about get rid of them because they detract from the historic character of the neighborhood. We think they're very effective. We heard from a lot of people that they are effective. I think they're only running in the morning and afternoon at the peak times, but they do make a difference. In other communities where we work, they do make a difference. There's some other things like just visibility. We noticed as you walked into the village, this was the intersection as you come in from the north where we felt like the speeding was the most. You don't see the activity of the village core. Some of this overgrowth of the vegetation obscures your visibility. So some simple things would be, clearing that out, maybe limbing up the tree or opening up that sight line. But implementing some traffic calming at this intersection would help. There's a large striped area where trying to restrict the driving lane. We think this could be pronounced more. We wouldn't say build up a bulb up. We understand the need for snow plows to be able to get over this area, but we think you could distinguish that with a different paving, and we'll show some examples. And whether it's just a stamped asphalt in that section versus the regular asphalt, there's some examples of, we think where sidewalks cross over a driveway. It's important to continue that sidewalk, not necessarily using cobble, but just that there should be a visual connection between the sidewalk, knowing that vehicles, a cue to vehicles that they're crossing a pedestrian area. This is something that we did in Monroe, Wisconsin. This is probably a lot more formal looking than what you have, but it's using, this is a sidewalk bump out. They wanted to narrow the roadway and get more sidewalk area. They have a very large parade every year, and there was concern that the trucks and floats wouldn't get around it. That was a full plow. So what we did was we used just a different stamped surface to distinguish between the travel lanes and have a different surface that reads more as that parking zone and the sidewalk expansion zone. This is an example. You forget the palm trees. You can pretend you're in Vermont, but this is a roadway in South Carolina, Bluffton, South Carolina, and it's just showing an asphalt that in this case has oyster shells in. Here there might be a granite aggregate in the asphalt, but it just creates a visual distinction between the parking zone and the vehicular zone as a way to do that. And we have some graphics that we'll show when we show in conjunction with this next project. The next one, there is a significant vacant parcel in the village core. We met with Virginia the other day and talked about some opportunities for there. We think it's important for an infill development site. We heard a lot the other night about a desire for a little more density in the village core. Whatever happens there to reinforce that street edge. It provides an opportunity for some of those micro retail, residential scale businesses that Tripp talked about. And then it provides an opportunity to take advantage of those river views. So this is the picture at the top here in the Warren store. So this is the vacant lot right now. And what we talk, the tan colored buildings are existing buildings. This is the gallery, and this is Roth Real Estate, and this is the general store. And then the red represent infill, potential infill. And there's a large rock right in the corner that I don't think Virginia wants to move, so we'll keep that here for now. But the potential for a mixed-use building that might have some of that smaller scale retail, some residential, and maybe some smaller scale residential buildings, or even live workspace. It might have a gallery studio down below with living above. And then access, there's an access easement for residential uses on the shared driveway, so parking resource to serve some of the residential uses. And then there could be, this should actually be darker red, but parking for maybe some of these businesses as well that access from this way. We would discourage bringing a road all the way across there and try and take advantage of the existing access points and keep that as open space to the river. We talked to Virginia about the potential that maybe from this side, is there the opportunity to just provide a simple path and maybe another viewing platform down to the river for folks that are going to the general store. We're also showing this view that we talked about with the Warren store about some reorganization, some of the storage and logs that are held back here. Maybe there's an expanded storage area here that's screened in so that this area could be really opened up more as amenity, expand the outdoor dining areas, and provide a pathway. This is a tremendous overlook point right here at the confluence of the rivers, and then make that a little more of an opportunity for visitors to the store. We talk about ways to maybe designate the parking without painting stripes. Maybe it's just a stone inset that kind of gives an indication of where the lines are, but it's not so formal and finished looking as stripes. And then if we look at that in a model view, this is over the bridge, this is the Warren store, Roth Real Estate, and then this is showing potential infill buildings. This is the picture in. And you start to see with the sidewalk crossing at this intersection, coming down up to the school path, crossing here, a sidewalk along this area. We're suggesting that the parking areas and this parking area and along here maybe is distinguished with subtle difference in asphalt paving. I think we have some other views. And then the other potential is that that whole zone in the center of the village could be a different paving This is a small village in Maryland where the whole main intersection of the village is the stamped cobble pattern. And so if we have the core area, that from the bridge just down to this intersection, maybe that whole road section could be distinguished different. Or, as we said earlier, it could just be you just distinguish the parking area. So there's a couple options to look at to just help visually distinguish the different uses and spaces in that area. And then just some, again, different views showing the infill. Where, we're not designing these right now, we're just suggesting a concept. This might be 2 buildings, it might be 3, or it might be 4, but the scale, they should be like a 1.5-story building, something that's appropriate to scale of the existing buildings in the village. We would encourage keeping a zone of parallel parking here and building the sidewalk behind that, a well-marked crosswalk in this area, and then, we're even suggesting that maybe a flush circle in the paving, and then that striped area that we showed earlier, again, could be a paved surface. In the summer, you might have some flower pots or removing the bollards out there, but in the winter, they can be removed so that snow plows could access across there. But visually, it just starts to condense this area and will help to encourage or discourage speeding. And then recommending street lights and so forth, ornamental street lights throughout as well.
With that, this is preliminary. We'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts and maybe any details that you have. We have work to do to go ahead.